Hello and welcome to the Weekend Spectator. My name is Grace Reilly, and I'm here with the one and only Paul Kengor. It's been a wild week in politics, and we're going to be going through a bunch of different things with Trump's inauguration coming up quickly, and with the very exciting press conference that he had a few days ago announcing some new possible territory for the United States. And also, we're going to be touching on Canada and things going on there. So, thanks so much for joining us. Paul, it's great to be with you.
Great and gracious Grace, good to be with you after the break here. And I saw my daughter off last weekend. She got married in New York, so we've had quite a break. It's been a wonderful Christmas, New Year's break.
Yes, and that's the perfect reason to have some time off of the podcast, right? To have your first daughter get married.
Right
Super
on.
exciting. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful pictures, beautiful wedding. And yeah, I'm just a very exciting day. But I guess to start, so the week began, and all of the sudden, we were going to be renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. That was
Mhm.
fun news. And then also talks of there have been for weeks now jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state, Trump trolling Trudeau in Canada, calling Trudeau the 51st governor of America to be the 51st state. But then all of a sudden this week, Trudeau finally announced his resignation.
Yeah, maybe Trudeau felt like he didn't want to stick around for the Trump administration.
Hey,
Actually,
I don't know. I think maybe Trudeau dropped out so that he could run for governor. He
yeah,
was
right.
prime minister and governor at the same time.
Trudeau is so awful, Grace. It's too bad that really he's not going to get 4 years of Donald Trump. I mean, he deserves 4 years of Donald Trump, and Trump threatening to make Canada 51st state. So he got off easy here. This was all in the works. It's been going on for a while. We had a really good piece on this by Kennedy Hall over the past week. Kennedy is a Canadian writer who's just started writing for us, kind of a well-known Catholic podcaster, lives in Canada, knows a lot about Canadian politics. Scott McKay wrote a piece of what Hasta la Vista, I think it is, Fidelito, I think it was called, or something like that, where he talks about the Justin Trudeau possibly being the son of Fidel Castro. By the way, I know that sounds like a really crazy thing. The first time that I heard that, yeah, exactly, and because I think we actually talked about this in one of my
Yes,
courses,
we
because
did.
yeah, one of my students alerted it to me, and at any time, so I lecture on Castro's Cuba, and every time that I've done those lectures, somebody has asked me about Justin Trudeau. And so I used to scoff at it and I didn't really pay attention to it. And then one time someone challenged me to take a look at it. And I investigated it. And it actually, I'm not saying that Justin Trudeau is Fidel's son, but the timeline matches up. And if you know, all right. And by the way, I wrote a whole book on Frank Marshall Davis, who also Scott McKay also talks about. I don't think Frank was Obama's biological father. All right. So I don't buy into all these different conspiracy theories. But in the case of Trudeau, his father, Pierre, and his mother were really wild radicals and what they called swingers back in the 60s and 1970s. They swapped different sexual partners. She was a radical. She was very open about this stuff. She loved Castro. She was in Cuba, Havana about that time. There's pictures of her and Fidel. So it actually seems
Hey, and he looks like him too.
possible.
I mean,
He
the
looks like him.
resemblance,
He
the
does.
resemblance too. Well, and that's the funny thing about this. It's fun to, put your tinfoil hat on and look at this. And all I'll say again is, some things are conspiracies, but some of these have got to be true. Who knows which ones are?
Right, right. By the way, it'd be real easy, just like Obama providing in 2008 his proof of where he was born, right? Justin could just simply do a DNA test and boom, you get rid of all of this, right?
But
Just like that. It's easy, right?
we won't do
Um,
it. And what does that mean?
right, right. Yeah, real easy. Wouldn't be hard to do. But anyway, so he's now gone, and Donald Trump, in the meantime, is talking about making Canada 51st state. And at first, I thought that was a joke, but I listened to the press conference on Monday from Mar-a-Lago, and I mean, Gracie seems to be dead serious about this.
Yeah,
And
I thought it was a joke at first too. I think a lot of people still think just think it's funny, the whole thing, but he does seem serious. He's definitely serious about Greenland.
well, and one of the reporters asked Donald Trump if he'd be prepared to use military force to take Canada as a 51st state. And Trump said no, but he was prepared to use economic force. I almost wrecked the car when I heard that, right? I'm listening to it on the radio. I'm like, what? And by the way, 51st state, okay, if you're a Republican, listen for a moment, all right? If Canada becomes a 51st state, the Republicans will never win the White House ever again. It'd
Mhm.
be another California. It'd be bam, 50 whatever electoral votes, just like that, right into the Democrat column. I mean, Democrats should sign on to this right away. This is one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard from Donald Trump. He's out of his mind if he wants Canada to be a 51st state. We don't
Yeah.
want any more states, right?
Oh,
Greenland, Puerto Rico, wherever, right? Let's
yeah,
shed states. In fact, how about if we give California to Canada?
and they
Right,
want
let's
it
do that.
apparently. Oh, they want
Right.
it apparently. Well, and the leftist like obviously the policies of Newsom would be right in line, which are a complete mess. And we've seen this week the awful wildfires. I mean,
Yeah, terrible.
it's terrible, terrible. Hopefully they are able to resolve it soon, but just the mismanagement's awful. But yeah, no, I thought this was a joke for a long time. I still think it kind of is. There's a lot of funny things floating around the internet. We'll put some up on the screen, just the different things people have posted. Pretty funny. And a favorite is sent like a picture of someone holding a flag down in Florida, and it's a meme that says when the first hurricane hits from the Gulf of America, someone running with a flag in the rain. So it's so people have definitely had a lot of fun online, but we
Well,
want to go ahead.
well, and what's really weird about this too is that Trump's an isolationist, right? We don't want to be in Europe. We don't want to be part of Russia, Ukraine, all this different stuff. Had questioned NATO back in 2015, 2016. The great thing about the first Trump administration was the restraint. I mean, he didn't get us involved in foreign wars, foreign entanglements, to use the words of George Washington. Had the Abraham Accords with Israel and the Middle East. Now all of a sudden, it's kind of like the big bad days of 1898 or 1823, the Monroe Doctrine, Western Hemisphere, the bully pulpit of the presidency, carry a big stick, asserting yourself in Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, right? Panama Canal, taking back the Panama Canal, Greenland, Canada. So it's like this kind of big bully or beast in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, Americans elected him to secure the southern border, not to take Canada and Greenland of all things. So, where's all of this even coming from? Who wants this? Ironically, too, we're talking about this today. This is pre-recorded. As Jimmy Carter's service is happening in Washington, D.C., I think the National Cathedral, it was Jimmy Carter that gave the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. And great debate. In fact, our Francis Sempa wrote a great piece on this week. Watch the 1978 firing line debate between William F. Buckley Jr. and George Will on one side, favoring giving back the Panama Canal, and Ronald Reagan and Pat Buchanan on the other side, not favoring giving back the Panama Canal. So I could see Trump's point. But at this point, I mean,
Well,
who really wants it?
and also that was one thing, and then the rest of this is really stacked up on it. The one point I will make is, and someone else made this, I just saw on X or something like that, but just at least the bright side of it is that it is a sign of us being a strong nation, which I think a lot of people for a long time have felt like we've weakened so much on the world stage. So on the bright side, that's one positive of it, but I think everything that you said stands. And we want to talk too, because we don't have too much time, about also, just jumping back to 1980, we do this a lot on the show, but it's especially relevant with Trump's inauguration coming up because of the situation in the Middle East. And we wanted to talk about the hostages that Hamas still has, Trump's statements and threats to them, saying that all hell will break loose in the Middle East if they don't release the hostages by the time he's elected. And also, we want to reflect on your expertise and the piece that you wrote for the American Spectator, reflecting on the Iranian hostage deal exchange release that happened back right as Reagan took office, and what the political implications were at that time that made it happen the way that it did, that is parallel to what we could be seeing in the coming weeks now. But either way, we should be vigilant and aware of these historical connections.
Yeah, that was last Tuesday. We had that piece up all day as a lead at our website. So the one thing that really struck me, well, many things, but in particular from that press conference, was when Donald Trump said that he gave Hamas a deadline of January 20th, his inauguration
Right.
date.
So really, like it's about time. The fact that this
Yeah,
is still going on completely blows my mind, actually. I
right.
never would have expected it to drag and drag and drag like this for years after, you know? So it's about time that something happens.
Yeah, and in fact, if it had been a Republican president the last year and a half with that going on, the media all the time would have the pictures of these hostages. I mean,
Oh, of
they'd be
course.
nationally known figures, right? But instead, because Sleepy Joe is there and he's doing absolutely nothing, and so Trump has come in and given them a deadline, an ultimatum, and said, if you don't turn the hostages, if you don't release them by January 20th, his inauguration, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. I mean, that was an amazing statement. And it harkens back to January 20th, another January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan, as he's being sworn in, 52 American hostages at that point held for 444 days, and they are released. Literally, as Ronald Reagan's hand is on the Bible, opened up Second Chronicles 7:14, his mother Nell's Bible. She wrote in the margin a wonderful verse for the healing of a nation. As he's being sworn in, the Iranians released the
As
hostages.
he's being sworn in, his first act as president happens. Release.
Yeah, I was just incredible, and so yeah, and I go through in the article because Reagan is my area, right? I've written so many books and all other stuff on Ronald Reagan. Reagan had made several threats in the previous months leading up to that to the Iranians about releasing the hostages. Now he didn't say anything quite like what Donald Trump said this past week. All hell will break loose, but
His
kind
style.
of right, that's right. That's Trump's style, but kind of similar to Trump, Reagan didn't specify what was going to happen. But as Trump said, I need not specify. I even told one of the reporters, only a stupid person would answer your question about what will I do,
Mhm.
right? But just wait and see, he said. All hell will break loose for everybody. Now, what would that look like? I don't know, but I'll tell you, this our podcast goes up this weekend. We're just a few days away. Well, I guess a week and a half away from the inauguration. But watch very closely January 20th to see what happens with the hostages, because this could get very, very, very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, and I think the whole point too of I mean, obviously there's no doubt that Trump will take action if need be. He has before in other situations, but it probably won't come to that, or at least that's what he's hoping and what I'm sure the terrorists are hoping, because it will mean their demise, as it has previous leaders before. Under
Right. Although I don't know what that would look like, right? I mean,
I don't know either. Yeah.
I don't know what he could do beyond what Israel is already doing in Gaza to, apprehend, seize, grab a hold of, shoot, kill, put in jail who's ever holding the hostages. I mean, I guess, well, I mean, you could involve the Marines and the US Special Forces and suddenly put them in Gaza in a way that hasn't been done before. I mean, I guess that's not rocket
People,
science, right?
yeah, and I bet people wouldn't be happy if that happened. Plenty of people would not. But I mean, and two, though, I think it kind of reminds me, looking back just to the campaign, of the amount of times that both Biden and Harris, but especially Harris, bragged about their handling of foreign policy, of conflicts overseas. And this is just the perfect example of the fact that all of this chaos did break out under their administration, and the weakness that they were just shining across the world. And I think that there is something to be said for that weakness and what it's allowed to perpetuate across the globe, and the strength that Trump naturally carries with his iron fist, so to speak, on
Right.
all these issues.
Yeah, and I mean, you could be certain, I would think, that the people in Gaza fear Donald Trump more than they do Joe Biden, right? I mean, the Russians and the Iranians certainly feared Ronald Reagan more than they did Jimmy Carter. I
Mhm.
mean, Carter was a complete patsy. They just rolled right over Carter.
Well, and that's
So,
exactly what's happened with Biden and Harris. And you know what? Why would they be feared? They've done absolutely nothing.
right,
And their administration has turned into a joke on the public stage as well, just by nature of how they've carried themselves, all the health stuff, just the different ways, the multitude of different ways that they have found to show weakness on the world stage, which is has come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan said about the Russians, we learned long ago when you're negotiating with the Russians, you must negotiate with them from a position of strength, not weakness. He said, if you're carrying a dove of peace in one hand, you had to have a sword in the other, right? The Russians respect strength. And that's true of the terrorists as well. And if you show yourself, Jimmy Carter like, by the way, the Carter 4 years are so much like the Biden 4 years. I mean, it's really just astonishing in Afghanistan. I mean, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan under Carter. Look what happened in Afghanistan under Biden. The Taliban took it back over. Look what's happened with Iran. Look what happened with the Russians. Look at energy prices, inflation. It's kind of uncanny how similar those 2 4 years have been were.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And with all of this, I think it's going to carry into, at least with Trump's handling of our adversaries and everything else, it's all going to carry into what he does here on the border, which you mentioned earlier, how that's a huge reason. That was a top issue for voters, one of the main reasons that so many elected Trump, because to fix this chaos, utter chaos that's happened with the border. And I think it will be very interesting to see what the administration does with that, like off the get-go. And there's a lot of different things that he's talked about doing in the first 100 days. He has a lot that will be going on, but I think especially people are on the edge of their seats to see what will happen with that. And it was funny just a few days ago for my work with Restoration of America, we were just looking back over the Democrat statements, and of course, years and years ago, Bill Clinton, his immigration policy and deportation policies are something to look at. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, all the Chuck Schumer, all of these people have said time and time again back before that, oh, yes, you should deport illegal aliens. It's
Right.
illegal across the border. So this is something that everyone used to agree on, but I would expect that in the coming weeks, as soon as Trump takes office, all we're going to see in the media is a bunch of sob stories about
Right.
deportations and how evil and how awful and how horrible it is and how Trump is the worst. Trump is racist, this, that, the other. I think that's what we're going to see, but we can't, I think that's important then to point back to, well, this is something everyone used to agree on. It also is the logical, makes sense thing to do. And we've kind of lost sight of that somehow because the left has taken it so far to the left.
That's right. It'll be like the 1980s when the media suddenly discovered homeless Americans, right? And now they're bringing out their cameras, showing homeless guys on every corner. That's exactly what they're going to do. I mean, they're going to have their cameras there to catch every heart wrenching story. And if you want to hear the story about, immigrants from illegal immigrants from Guatemala or Venezuela setting people on fire in New York subway stations, you'll have to go to Fox, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that'll be it. But a big difference today is that the kind of legacy mainstream media today doesn't have the audience that they used to. They have only their own people that they talk to, and otherwise people don't pay attention to them. So that's a big advantage today for Donald Trump that Reagan didn't have. Another big advantage is Trump doesn't care what they think about him, and he doesn't have to get reelected.
And
So we'll
he's
see.
very clearly in the majority now, too. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
And
right, right.
again, who would have thought? Really, really crazy times. But I guess before we close, do you have any other thoughts or things you want to highlight? It really has been a crazy week from Trudeau that we didn't even mention actually Kamala certifying Trump's election and certifying loss. We didn't even get to that, which was very funny. Uh,
Right.
yeah, you can't beat that. But it has been yet another crazy whirlwind of a week in politics for sure.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, folks, just keep your eyes on what's going on with the hostages in Gaza because Trump set a deadline, January 20th, and all hell will break loose. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Now, if Hamas would actually step forward and Iran, like in 1980, 81, suddenly let them go, then it would be like, Reagan's Morning in America, an era of national renewal. It would, just like that, change the national mood, and Trump would look like a hero if that happened. If the media even talks about it, right, even covers it. But if they don't let him go, the hostages go, and Trump has to respond with some type of military force, and like you said, all hell could break loose, and I don't know what that might look like.
Yeah, it is crazy stuff. So be on the lookout for that. And also make sure that you check out the pieces that we've gone over and mentioned throughout this episode and more at spectator.org, especially that one comparing 1981 Inauguration Day to what will be happening in a few weeks. Super interesting. But thank you for watching the show. Make sure that you share this with your friends, like, subscribe, just to stay up to date with our latest episodes. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Grazie, Grace. We'll talk to you next week and see you all next week.